don't discount the character of you, your life, the storyline, the narrative. When we talk about self-inquiry and seeing that the narrative about you, the thoughts, the beliefs, etc., are all thoughts, that's a particular way of accessing unbound consciousness. It leads to a certain concentration of attention into the thought gate, or the world of consciousness, the internal world, in a way that actually shuts the sense gates, and then leads to a dissolving of the constant tendency to subjectify in thought and objectify reality, storylines, thoughts, beliefs, conclusions, judgments, and remain in that dualistic experience inside consciousness that feels like struggle, suffering, etc. So we are using that strategy of actively disidentifying from thoughts to clarify that space of consciousness. And this tills the soil for shifts in identity, particularly the first shift in identity. But outside of that practice, throughout the day, it's not necessary to convince yourself that there's anything wrong with the activities of the character, of you, the storyline of you, even the memories, what you do, what you've done, the mistakes you've made, all of it, the judgments, the decisions, the non-decisions, basically all the events that make up the conventional sense of you are just fine the way they are, because there's no other way they could be. So there's nothing to sort out about that. So you can just leave it alone. It's okay. There's nothing to hide. There's nothing to reject. There's nothing to perfect. It's a storyline. It's just an expression of phenomenon. It's an expression of conditions as what we call your life conventionally. So the character's just fine. It doesn't need fixing. And it's not what wakes up. It doesn't need to be spiritualized, repaired, or really even healed. Because if there's trauma, that's part of the character. That's part of what the storyline is. If there's healing going on, that's also part of the storyline. So again, the storyline itself, the character, the narrative of your life is perfectly okay just how it is. It takes care of itself. It interacts with the world in the best way it knows how. It's intelligent to a degree. And there's a limit to its intelligence, of course. It has some wisdom, but there's a limit to its wisdom. It has selfish tendencies and it has selfless tendencies. It's fine. It's the character. It's the storyline of you. It's perfectly okay. There's nothing to discount about that. You don't have to actively negate it all the time. There's no one here, there's no one, there's nothing. That's just not skillful. And it's sort of missing the point. Well, it's not sort of missing the point, it's completely missing the point of what no self-realization is. No self-realization is not a negation of the character of you at all. In fact, it ultimately becomes an affirmation of it. Because when you see it, there's no self. There's no identity. There's no glue that holds reality together. There's no substance to anything. There's no essence to anything. It's all sort of empty appearance, but it's vibrant and alive and intimate and full and empty and paradoxical at every level. So there's no reason to negate the character. There's no reason to negate the storyline at all. The mistakes, the silliness, the selfishness, the confusion, the disorientation, even the tendency to try to fix itself, to try to help itself, to try to make itself feel better. It's all fine. It's perfectly fine. In fact, you can feel a lot more love for it when you see clearly that it's just a character. It's not a character apart from you. It's not a distanced experience. It's just that the way we experience ourselves in a storyline, in a narrative, it's all based on conditions, most of which we are not consciously aware of. So it's just an outward expression. And it's perfectly okay. So everything about your life is perfectly okay, even the parts that don't feel perfectly okay. Now, when you're moving through this realization process, what often happens is we uncover an underlying tendency to self-negate, self-abandon, etc. And that can be confused for what some people refer to as no self. But it's not the same thing at all. The self-abandonment is actually caused by that misperception of the nature of identity as separate from everything. When that's gone, when that clears out, and there's no experience of separation, then you experience things on all sides, from inside and outside, from nowhere at all, and from everywhere. It's a holistic experience, let's say, but that word is pretty loaded these days. But from there, there's no angle from which to judge something as right or wrong. It just is. And this spontaneously leads to a massive reduction in desire and aversion. There's still preferences in the character, in the storyline, in the observation of what you do and don't do. But in the moment, in the endless dissolving here, there's no sense of pushing or pulling on anything anymore. There's no sense of something needing to be corrected. And this is where peace and freedom lie. And it's at the heart of what's going on in everyone's experience. Once the mind calms down enough, once the tendency to keep distancing ourselves from life and formulating a position, formulating a view or a frame of reference, when that subsides enough, then it's clear that things are just as they are, and they're perfectly okay as they are. And from that, proceeding as a character is perfectly fine. It's probably the deeper meaning of self-love, because you can love the character when you realize it's innocent. It's not really made any mistakes. It's just responded to its environment. It's done the best it could, and it will continue to, with the information it has, with the habituation it has, with the tendencies it has, and with the effects of external circumstances. So let it be, and just take this opportunity to investigate what's happening in the immediate, again and again and again, and everything will fall into place.